Week 1 is in the books. Hopefully you were able to advance in your survivor pools. Quite the scare for the old chalky Denver Broncos. Our Jaguars pick came home. New England Patriots, not so much. Arizona Cardinals. There's still lots left on the board, and a interesting week 2 with a lot of up in the air matchups, I shall say. Myself, Erik Beimfohr, and Rob Coakley are going to get into everything about your week 2 survivor pools right now here at Spike Week. All right, Rob, week 2 survivor, I would say here at old Spike Week. Week 1 was pretty good. We were real close to having another Bengals situation on our hands in week 1. Bo Nix was pretty adamant about keeping that one close all the way down to the end. The Titans defense also hanging in there. The New England Patriots as a pivot was a failure, but the Jacksonville Jaguars took care of business. The Arizona Cardinals took care of business. There were plenty of paths, obviously, as there always are, to winning, but I feel pretty good process-wise, right, about the whole Broncos thing. I think it shows you how little we know early in the season, and we might even know that the Broncos are good, but any NFL game can go in a goofy way with a few different plays. Bo Nix turns it over a couple times, and those Broncos teams were almost out in week 1.
There's a reason these things are hard to win, and it's because some of the biggest favorites throughout the season will lose a game. And to your point, the Bengals last year against the Patriots, we brought up the Ravens, which is an interesting one to talk about because I think they're going to be heavily chalked this week. But when they were heavily chalked last year against the Raiders beat them. So that was another huge blow to Survivor contest in the first 5 weeks, I believe. I can't remember exactly which week the Ravens played.
It was early, yeah.
It was early. And between those 2 games, it wiped out a majority of these contests. So, yeah, you never know. And I think that's why we want to always try to avoid the chalk when we have the ability to avoid the chalk. Now, I took the Patriots as one of my 2 picks last week in my big pool. Maybe that was a little bit too fancy. I like the process that I went through for that one, though. I thought it was fine. I did almost pivot off of them at the last second, but I think you have to take those swings sometimes, and I really like taking those swings week 1 as opposed to week 16, right? I'd rather, I lost the pool last year in week 17. It hurts the soul a lot more than losing it in week 1, let me tell you. So, yeah, not that I want to lose, but I'm willing to take those chances because throughout the course of a season, a lot of these pools have double picks. You're trying to pick 20 to 22 winners. I think taking some of the swings early is fine. And the good news is if you did get eliminated, there'll be extra contests to enter starting each week if you want to fire it back in there. So, but I'm excited for this week too.
I would also add, you and I talked really briefly on Monday night for the Survivor only folks that are here. We do a Monday night show, and there's a lot of content here on Spike Week. So if you want to get into non-Survivor stuff, I promise we got you covered. So first of all, the Raiders beat the Ravens in week 2. So yes, through 2 weeks last year, it was like, oh my God, if you're like a Survivor noob and you're just taking the big favorites, it was like, this is the worst experience I've ever had in my life. I'm 0-2. I can't even pick one winner. But the Patriots, we talked really briefly, when we recorded the show, we didn't know Christian Gonzalez did not play for the Patriots. And now that's one player. It doesn't change the entire landscape, but he's a pretty important player for the Patriots defense. And I'm not saying he would have changed the outcome of the game because the Patriots couldn't score anyway themselves, and he does not play offense. But maybe Geno doesn't throw for nearly 400 yards if Christian Gonzalez is playing. So you just never know. And I think I didn't swap them out, but we both were like, do we really want to still do this? When we remove the best player of the Patriots defense, and maybe we should have swapped. But like I said, I'm not sure it mattered, but that's just something to consider, right? That we're recording this on a Thursday afternoon, getting this out before Thursday Night Football so everybody can make their picks. But there still can be things that change over the weekend that will impact some of this. And as we head into week 2, I just want to hit a couple of those, sort of injury notes. I'm sure everyone, unless you're living under a rock, has noticed the San Francisco 49ers, which may have been a team someone might have been interested in as they played the Saints this week. I guess you still can, but I feel a lot better. I don't feel so good about the San Francisco 49ers at this point in time. No Ricky. A lot of Ricky is what's going to happen in that game, but no Brock Purdy, no George Kittle. Juwan Jennings is hurt. Trent Williams came back and played in that game, but he got banged up in their week 1 opening game. It's a little bit bleak in San Francisco from a Kansas City perspective. I also just thought this was notable today. Not that anybody necessarily wanted to take that game, but maybe, I don't know. Xavier Worthy is practicing. So like I've learned I don't know anything about shoulder injuries. Like
or Jones fractures. Or
yeah, Jones. Jaden Reed, it looks awesome with a fracture that people told me you like can't run on. And Xavier Worthy was supposed to be out for 2 months and he's playing. So I don't know, but why I'm saying that is also make sure you're monitoring some of the injury reports because we're already getting kind of a lot of chaos, even just in week 2. But not to put the cart in front of the horse, what are you overall sort of thinking from a macro level strategy in week 2?
One other thing I wanted to bring up, because I don't remember if we brought this up in week 1. My thought process as we talk through these survivor pools are for large field survivor pools that we're talking about. I think you could scale down in some of the smaller field stuff. So like I wouldn't have taken the Patriots in a smaller field one last week, right? That was a large field pick. And I think it's very important to understand like what kind of pool you're in, just like you have to understand what sort of DFS contest you're in. Like if you're in a smaller single entry versus like a huge lotto field, right? where you're able to take some guys in that you would never take in the SPY, for instance. So I think that's something to keep in mind as you're making your survivor picks. And so when I'm talking for large field stuff because that's what I'm playing for these survivor contests. I went through the schedule for this week, and I think there are some pretty good ones. Speaking of like from a strategy perspective, I'm not doing it tonight, but the Packers Commanders game, I really like targeting the Thursday night game for a home favorite that I think has a significant edge. I just think that gets a home favorite in a Thursday night game gets an extra layer of home field advantage for the turnaround on the short week.
Extra
now,
half point or something like that because of the short turnaround with the travel, et cetera, et cetera. Yep.
Yeah. So usually I like to take those if it makes sense. And the Packers are like very borderline for me here. So I'm just going to X them out for now. There's not someone that I want to take. And I'd rather take the Packers later in a better spot somewhere.
They look quite good. So they might be one of those teams we want to say. That was one of the most, if not the most impressive performance of week 1 by the Packers.
Yeah, when people were like, I saw a lot of people before the season started saying, why are the Packers in the top 5 in the power rankings? And it's like, well, you just saw on week 1 why they're one of the top 5 teams. So I think there's a lot of spots this week. And the first thing I noticed was the first team I was going to throw out. And it's funny because it's the team that lost in week 2 last year that has another massive edge this week, which is the Ravens at home versus the Browns. Splash Sports, I'm just going to show, I'm showing the wrong one. Splash has them shown at like a 88% win probability right now. And you know what that means? Everyone's going to go in, they're going to click that button, and they're going to hit submit and walk away from their computer. So the Ravens are going to definitely be chalked this week. And I get it. They're a home favorite, a huge home favorite against a bad team. But they were a home favorite last year in week 2 against the Raiders, who were also a bad team and lost that game. And I'm not saying they're going to lose, but I think they're going to draw just significant ownership this week. So that means I want to just pivot away from them. They're my number 1 pivot away for this week, just for that purpose. And then you start looking at other teams. You get the Lions at home against the Bears. That is a divisional matchup, which I don't love. The Bengals at home against the Jaguars is an interesting one to talk through maybe. But the two that I'm really focused on this week is the Cowboys at home against the Giants. I sort of like that. I don't like the fact that it's a divisional matchup, but I think with Russ still starting and that offense just not looking great and the Cowboys being good, I will say.
Better than expected for sure in week 1.
And the other game that I'm really interested in is the Cardinals at home against the Panthers. Those are my two that I am really pivoting to this week. I think there are a few others that people could take a look at, but I think everything else starts to get a little bit more hairy. The 49ers one we could have talked about. I think you laid out why we shouldn't even have that discussion. Plus, they're on the road on top of everything. I think the Rams will be another one that people will pivot to as well, but they are also on the road against the Titans. And I think the Titans defense is decent enough that the Rams probably win, but you might have a nail biter on your hand again against the Rams with the Titans. So for me, I don't know, we haven't talked, but for me, it's Cardinals, Panthers, it's Cowboys, Giants, and I'm not really sure what your overall thoughts are on this slate.
Yeah, so it's interesting because some of the teams that we liked last week, we also sort of, or definitely like this week. Someone might have said, "Well, I used the Cardinals last week," right? Is definitely something that someone might say. So we'll obviously go through a few different spots. I don't have as much conviction about this week as I did about last week. I felt pretty strongly about the Jaguars, and that one obviously came home. If I had to pick one that I felt the strongest about, and I'm looking at our good friends over at Pool Genius, of course, that Pool Genius team rankings, BetIQ, they have an awesome tool for Survivor stuff. It is behind their paywall, so I'll just shout some of it out without sharing all the goodies that they have over there. But they have your Ravens at 32%. They do have the Cowboys as the second highest owned team, and I'm so back and forth on them because I see it. I watched that Giants game, and brother, Russ, my man, tough scene. And if Andrew Thomas is not back, the left tackle for the New York Giants, I will feel a lot better about the Dallas Cowboys. But I'm also not ready to, like, off of the one pretty solid performance and even somewhat shocking performance on the defensive side from the Cowboys, like, I'm certainly not ready to, like, anoint them as a team I feel really good about, as, like, they're definitely not going to be the chalk, like you mentioned. But I also don't know that I'll ever want to use them again, to the point of, like, I don't have a ton of confidence in them. If you did not use the Cardinals, though, I think they would be my favorite. And partially because I also don't know when I'm going to want to use them. I'm not sure there will ever be a divisional matchup that I would even, like, consider them in. Seattle is solid. San Francisco is a mess right now, but I still don't know that I'm going to, like, feel excited to play the Cardinals against it. I'm definitely not going to feel excited to play the Cardinals against the Rams. So kind of third-ish in ownership is where we're projecting the Cardinals to be. I think the Panthers are down there with the Saints as the worst team in the NFL. I think the Browns are kind of scary, to the Ravens point. I know I'm bouncing around, but those would be, like, the three worst teams in the league, I think, that I would classify there. But the Browns defense is the best thing about any of those teams, and Flacco can just, do enough sometimes. That he kept him in the game this week. Who knows? The Giants defense is the best thing about like, if we're moving on against the Cowboys, I think that Giants defense is a little bit scary. The Panthers have just, like, absolutely nothing that scares me. On the road in Arizona, not necessarily wanting to use Arizona again. At least the current state of Carolina, like, no Jalen Coker. We talked about that last week with the Jaguars, of, like, why we like the Jaguars. It's just, like, there's, like, nothing inspiring about the Carolina Panthers. They're on the road. I think that proved to be true. So if I had to pick a favorite, like, you haven't selected them in week one, no other nuances that we'll get into, I think the Cardinals over the Cowboys for me at the top end.
Yeah. And just to go through the Cowboys schedule real quick, this is where it gets a little tricky because I'm going to give you their home opponents as we go through. So they have the Giants, obviously, this week. They play the Packers at home.
Oof.
They play the Commanders at home, obviously. They play the Cardinals at home. They play the Eagles at home. They play the Chiefs at home.
Jesus.
They play the Vikings at home. They play the Chargers at home.
Okay.
That's their home schedule. So their
So
one
it would be
home
those
game,
Cardinals. It might only be those Cardinals as your option for the Cowboys in that
Yeah,
week.
if you don't
And
take
I'm
them,
not saying I feel good about that. I'm just saying that's really your only option, probably.
yeah, if you don't take them against the Giants this week, that's, like, the only time you can take the home game. Now, they have a road game against the Jets, which is iffy. They have a road game against the Panthers, but the rest, and they have a road game against the Raiders. So, like, their best schedule opponents are mostly road games.
Okay.
If you're looking at the Cowboys now, Arizona, they're an interesting team because they have the Titans at home later in the season. They're playing the Packers at home, which LOL, no thank you. They have the Niners, which is the divisional, but they have the Jaguars at home in November, like the end of November. If you were like kind of put in a corner, you could take the Cardinals. I still don't love it, but it's one that you could take. They have the Falcons, and that's about it for their home games, but their road schedule is kind of a nightmare. So if you wanted to save the Panthers, I think you would be saving them for the Titans on October 5th, which is week 5. So that's the only other caveat that I would put in there with the Cardinals. It's like, and if you were willing to do that, if you felt good about that, you now have 2 weeks of the Cardinals being used as like not the top pick, but up there in the upper echelon.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
By the time you use them against the Titans, they wouldn't be able to be chalk because most of the people left in the pool theoretically aren't going to be able to pick them. So I would understand if you wanted to pivot off of Arizona for the reason that they have one more home game that we really like. It's relatively soon. And this is the Cowboys home game that I think you would have to take is at home against the Giants right now. So I would understand that pivot. I am currently still leading the Cardinals right now, but I think I'm going to be flipping coins until Sunday morning at lock between these two teams as I go through their schedule. So that's just me. I'm not sure if there's anything else you wanted to zoom in at and look at in terms of teams as well. Like we said, the Rams.
I think we should show. I'll go through a few that some people may be interested in that I'm not interested in. So I'm interested in those two that you shouted out. I'm not interested in the Rams. I think the Rams are a good team. I don't want to play them on the road against a Titans team that hung in there on the road with a really good Broncos team in week 1. I don't think the Titans defense is like terrible. I think Cam Ward is stylistically one of those quarterbacks that could just come out and, have one of those games. Like he can have a game that loses you. He can lose you the game, but he could also come out and play well. He's a rookie. We don't really know what to expect. There's a lot more variance in that. I also think this is like an interesting bounce back spot for the Titans, like not to pick them for Survivor, but I just think it's a little spooky for the Rams. I believe 2 starting interior offensive linemen for the Rams sprained their ankles last week. Matthew Stafford back there with a bad back behind an already like weak offensive line that just got weaker. It's just on the road a little bit spooky to me. They're the 4th highest owned projected team this week. Buffalo, this is a spot that like theoretically you might be able to get yourself excited about. I think the Jets are a pretty plucky underdog with the way they played offense in week 1. The defense wasn't as good, but I think that the score was not super indicative of how they played defense. They held the Steelers to 271 yards, I believe. They just, Rodgers did some Rodgers stuff on 3rd downs and in the red zone. They scored a bunch of touchdowns and then kicked a 60-yard field goal. It's like, but I think the Jets are competent and pretty big letdown spot for the Bills. I think people probably not going to go to them, but they're 5th in ownership. The Lions are.
You want a quick funny thing about the Bills Jets game? My first 2 or 3 years of playing Survivor was getting knocked out by picking the wrong side of a Bills Jets game.
Zach Wilson beat them 2 years ago.
This is this is going back like 15 years, but just picking the wrong side of a Bills. This is like probably Mark Sanchez years. Just picking the wrong side of a Bills Jets game knocked me out of my first 2 or 3 Survivor.
Sounds like Sanchez, Tyrod, and then maybe eventually wasn't Tyrod, and so you probably picked against Kyle Allen or I'm trying to think of who they had the one quarterback that threw like 5 picks in the first half for the Bills the one season. I remember
whoever was throwing to Stevie Johnson. That's
yes those were the days, man. Good old Stevie Johnson. But I just think I would rather save the Bills, and I don't think this is a very good spot for them. Like if you wanted to say like take a really awesome team, I'm not doing the Baltimore thing, and I don't think it's a great spot for the Bills. I think the Lions are interesting. Just would generally rather save them. It is a divisional matchup, and they were quite bad. I think it's like a fun bounce back spot for the Lions, but I think it's that requiring a bounce back is not generally very fun in week 2 of the season. So after that, it would be a discussion about Cincinnati that you mentioned before, and the team that lost last week that we picked, New England, who was bad. And like I said, you don't really like a bounce back spot, but there ain't a much better bounce back spot than the Miami Dolphins, who were the worst team of week 1, probably them in Carolina. Can we trust the Patriots on the road? Probably not, but is that worth any discussion, the Bengals and the Patriots? Because Miami really was that bad. And would we like to, if you didn't, obviously you took New England on 1. I had 3 and I took New England on 1 too. So I'm out of 1 New England bullet, but would it be something to consider them? Just, is Miami that bad, basically?
Yeah, but that's 2 of 3 of my rules being broken at that point for me, where it's New England on the road in a divisional matchup. And historically, early games in Miami for the Patriots have been a disaster going back to the Tom Brady years. They just could not win in Miami in September because of, whatever, call it whatever you want, whether it's the stadium that's insane, the way that they allowed that to be built, or, the humidity or whatever. I think it's one of those ones, if it was week 15 and we're like searching through the teams and we're like, I guess I got to do the Patriots at Miami. It doesn't feel great, but 19 of the teams I want to take are wiped out right now. So you kind of have to do it, and you're starting to deal with bye weeks and stuff like that. I think there's just too much on the board here to take the Patriots. And I can hear people yelling at their screen, like, that's what we were saying about the Patriots last week.
Yeah.
But I think the process was a little different last week. So, I just think it's too much to kind of hope that you get the road divisional win in week 2 when there's these other games to pick that aren't going to be as owned as they should be. I know what you said for the ownership for Baltimore, but I'm going to say that it comes in higher than what you think, than what it's saying. I would
These
bet
other options are not great, to your point. So I think it would lend it to, like, we're just talking, we're more comfortable with uncomfortable picks than the average bear, and we're not very comfortable with any of these other ones. So
right. So I think the only other one that people might pivot to, I don't think it'll be highly owned, but I wouldn't be shocked if you see some ownership on the Steelers, like maybe 5 or 6% ownership, maybe somewhere around there. I don't know what you're seeing projected for that, but my guess would be there's
very low.
They're showing 60% win probability on Splash. So I think people will look at that number. They'll see the Steelers at home. Nobody really likes the Seahawks, like in terms of winning football games, which I understand. So not a divisional game. West Coast traveling east, theoretically. I think it's a 1 o'clock game as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you sort of get all of that stuff, and that's like my dream week 7 matchup, right? I would love that in like week 7 when I'm out of some teams. There's bye weeks happening. I would be really looking at that Steelers game. I just don't think we have to do it in week 2. So
that's how I feel about the Patriots as well. Not that like we don't have to do it. Like you said, we just did it last week. Big dumb idiots. But they have a last place schedule. The Patriots do. So you're never going to feel comfortable with them, but we are going to get extra shots later on down the season where, look, even if they're bad, they're going to be playing other bad teams that we'll be able to, at least, like, you're not going to feel awful, right? Like when they play the Giants in whatever week 15, when they play the Dolphins again, when they play the Dolphins again later, when they play the Panthers at home, when they play the Saints, when they, they're going to have options for the Patriots. That maybe it was a mistake to not think about that last week, even though I still kind of feel okay about it. The Pittsburgh thing is somewhat interesting. I'm probably a little higher on Seattle than like the market is, not by like a significant amount. I think they should have beat San Francisco last week. Stop kicking those lame ass field goals, Mike McDonald. But they do check a lot of boxes. So I think they should be in play in terms of, like, they probably shouldn't have been on the afterthought side of things, but they do have some spots later as well, at home against the Colts, at home against, who knows what the Bengals are going to look like right later. They do play the Dolphins later, etc. So there's a couple of spots for the Steelers that I think will be like playing. I think it's at Miami. No, at home. Right, having the Dolphins come to Pittsburgh on December 21st is like a get me to that game. like get me to Tomlin and the Steelers against Tua and whoever the new coach of the Miami Dolphins is by that point. Like that would be the dream spot, I think, to use the Steelers. So if we could possibly hold on to them until then, I think that would be great, which kind of brings me back to the only other team that I think is in play that we haven't discussed, and that would be the Bengals. And I just don't know how much faith I have in that team to use them when we do have some other options that I probably feel a little bit better about. The ownership looks nice, and I don't know that we're ever going to feel good about the Bengals.
Yeah.
You saw week 1 exactly why, and we know the defense isn't very good, so you're just always at risk of a loss when you have, one of the worst defenses in the NFL. And apparently Zach Taylor has still forgotten that he has Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins on his offense from time to time. They would be worth discussing, but I just don't know that I can get there.
Well, I think to your point, just looking at their schedule now, there are other home games that will be worth discussing in the future. They're at home versus the Jets. They're at home versus the Bears. They're at home versus the Patriots. Those are October, late October, early November, late November. So mid-season-ish, where I actually like the Bengals a little bit more mid-season, just based on who they've been as a team the last couple of years. But to your point, this is one of those rare spots where Cincinnati's a home favorite, that the field's not going to converge on them, because once it gets to those later parts of the season, I don't know what that whole week schedule looks like, but people are going to be looking at them against the Jets. They'll probably be looking at them against the Bears, and they damn sure will be looking at them against the Patriots again this year. So the more that I think about it, and you brought it up, I think they're worth throwing in the discussion, because it gets a little tough with them. They have a tough schedule coming up after this Jaguars game too. They got Vikings, Broncos, Lions, Packers, Steelers. So this is
they're not it's going to be cold outside by the time we're talking about them again on the show.
Right.
Right.
So they need to start 2-0. As you've said in the past, it's not a must-win situation week 2, but it damn sure feels like it with the schedule that they have coming up. So they might actually be worth visiting in this. And I hate that I'm doing this on the spot, but they're going to be a consideration. So they're in my pool now between them, the Cowboys, and the Cardinals. And I'm going to probably take Arizona for now, but this, if you're not part of the Discord, I would definitely be checking the Survivor Discord, because as we get closer to the lock, that might change.
There is, of course, a link to the Discord in the description. It is free to join, but as the Survivor channel and everything that Rob is mentioning, tons of different premium channels, just $5 a month. There's a link to sign up for premium. Just go to spikeweek.com and you see it in the header. Just $5 a month to join the Discord, and you can ask any and all questions about Survivor or DFS or your season-long teams or your favorite bets or whatever. We got it all in there. If you had to rank, I'll go first because you kind of sort of just did it. If you had to rank your top 3 picks this week, I think I'm still Arizona 1. I think I came into it thinking I might be interested in Pittsburgh or New England, but I think I've talked myself out of those 2. I think Cincinnati, for me as well, has made a charge up into there. Not because I think they're necessarily any better than Dallas, but when I look at Pool Genius, Cincinnati is 2%, Dallas is 17%.
Yeah.
We walked through both of those schedules. I'm not sure there's the one Cowboys game later against the Panthers, correct? But on the road.
On the road, yep.
Yeah. So they play the Panthers on the road. That would be really the only other game we would be really interested in targeting them. Though the Panthers are a team, when I see Panthers, when I see Saints, when I see who else am I missing? That's another bottom feeder. Anyway, when I see those bottom feeders,
Browns.
When I see those guys, it my eyes do light up a little bit of even on the road, But the Bengals don't have don't have a good matchup, right? Like you said, we would wait for a good matchup that you feel good about. I think we would have to wait till New England.
Yeah.
And that's a long ways away, and a lot of shit can change between now and then. And they lost to that New England team last year, and I'm not sure that I would trust them. Like, they may be 10-point favorites in that game, and I'm not sure I would feel that cozy about them. And by then, the last thing, they might be really popular. So, like, this might be the week. Go get in. It's probably going to be a shootout with Jacksonville, but go win. They've won a lot of those shootouts. Go win this shootout with Jacksonville, and you never have to sweat this miserable Cincinnati Bengals experience for the rest of the year. They've made a real run up my thought process as we've talked it through.
Yeah, then you look at the Cardinals schedule, and there are spots for the Cardinals in the future as well. So I think I'm leaning Cardinals 1, but I do think the Bengals have moved just through this conversation. I think I've moved them above the Cowboys. And now I think it's going to be Cardinals Bengals for me.
Which hilariously they play later this season. But yeah, I'm just not seeing a spot that I love for the Cardinals the rest of the way either. So that's part of it. It's very difficult. But I think, like I said, as we've talked this through, I was pretty adamant it would be Cardinals coming in, and I do still think I would put them first. If you said, especially like in your home league or something, I still wouldn't pick the Ravens, but I think I would just take the right. I'm in this 20 teamer or whatever, my work buddies, we have a survivor league. Like I think I would just take the Cardinals, but in the larger field stuff, I think the Bengals become a lot more interesting. I think I would put them 2 over the Cowboys, though I would keep the Cowboys at 3 for me.
Especially if you're seeing 17% on the Cowboys.
Yes, that's what they're showing.
I think maybe Ravens pull some of that ownership, and maybe it's closer to 15 or 14%, but I don't think it'll be too much lower if that's what it's showing. And we do have spots for the Cardinals, even though they're not as comfy. Again, they play the Titans at home and they play the Jaguars at home. So those are spots where you might feel good. But again, the Jaguars might be better by then. So I think I'm Cardinals. I keep saying thing. Right now I'm Cardinals, but I will be considering the Bengals all the way through lock on Sunday morning.
I like it. We will keep everybody up to speed again in the Survivor channel of the Discord. If you have any specific questions, you can also drop them in the comments on this video. Make sure you're monitoring those injury reports, and we will check back in with you guys next week in week 3. And I can't believe we're doing this Bengals Cardinals crap again, but here we are in Survivor. Go Bengals, go Cardinals, I guess, go Cowboys. We'll see you guys in week 3. Cheers.